Hi and welcome back to PDA Dad UK. In this episode I get to speak to the fantastic Vanessa D'Souza, who was a semi-finalist on Masterchef and is also an actually autistic advocate. So as I say, welcome back to PDA Dad UK. Please, before we go on, do go hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell. You'll always know when new content's coming up. And I'm getting so close to hitting that 10,000 subscriber mark. It'll be a huge milestone for me. So please go do that now. Thank you. As I say, in this episode, I get to speak with Adam Pearson from the Grumpy Gits. We get to speak to the fantastic Vanessa D'Souza. Vanessa is an actually autistic chef, and she's known as the Autistic Chef. She was a semi-finalist on Masterchef, and she is really strong on promoting the needs of autistic people within the food industry. So that ranges from things like understanding sensory profiling and the fact that some people's sensory needs will be different, things like food touching, which if you've got autistic kids, some people will be very familiar with, the texture of foods, all that kind of stuff. So she was really open, really interesting. It was fantastic hearing about how you merge doing something as demanding as MasterChef whilst also maintaining your mental health, especially when you have a neurodivergence. So absolutely fabulous interview. Hand over to that now and enjoy.
I am past Adam Pearson, joined by my right-hand man, past Duncan Casburn, with a very, very special guest. I don't want to do this one, not because of the person, but because of the subject, because I get Vietnam flashbacks whenever I have to discuss this fucking program. However, everyone was ill, I've been told. I don't believe them. I'll have to get the stitch up. But anyway.
Had they been eating your cauliflower?
They've been eating my cauliflower. Too soon, bro. Too soon. Anyway, enough about me. We are joined by an actual competent MasterChef, Vanessa D'Souza. Hey! How's it going, Vanessa?
Good, thank you. Trying to recover from the MasterChef process, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Oh, you only lasted a week.
I was there for a day and a half.
I can't say I'm envious because I was in it for like a good 3.5 months. It honestly took over my life.
So as someone who's done it and knows the pressure and the intensity and the schedule, no one thinks about the schedule. They just look at the cooking and go, oh, I could do that. No. What possessed you to apply?
What possessed me? I've always really loved the show. It's an area of special interest of mine. And cooking has just been such a part of my, I guess, autistic journey. You know, I have such severe food sensory sensitivity. Certain textures are not tolerable. I spent probably the first 15 years of my life only eating beige processed foods. So I actually got involved in cooking because, well, I didn't trust my parents. They kept trying to sneak vegetables into my food. All trust was lost. And so I just thought, let me cook it myself. It's the only safe way to know what you're getting. And it's presented in the way that I prefer it.
That makes so much sense. My daughter, as everyone will know, my daughter's autistic. And actually, funnily enough, she's getting a special interest in cooking as well, which is risky from my part because you kind of have to do the whole, oh, it's lovely, yeah, you know. But she's getting pretty good. That whole sensory side of thing, I think, is something people don't think about. I mean, how did that present itself when you're dealing with something like MasterChef?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because actually when I applied for the show, obviously part of me wants to get as far as I can. So I was in two minds of, I obviously told them on the application form I was autistic. But, you know, if you're talking about your food and your inspirations, I actually wasn't very clear with the production team as to whether I would be true to myself. You know, I was like, oh, I'm really inspired by all these different countries I've been to. And then when it came to the fact that I was on the show, I thought to myself, God, what a lie I'm going to have to live on national TV, that my world is not going to end if my rice touches my curry. And I wasn't okay with that. You know, you're going on national TV, and I was only diagnosed at the age of 36, so almost 2 years ago. I've spent my whole life lying and masking. This is my time to just be me. I think producers are really shocked at like, why is she deconstructing all her food? Why is she now saying that she doesn't want things touching? You know, I'm not eating them. I could have put my foods in a way that I don't want to eat them because, you know, John and Greg are eating them, not me. But I chose to take the opportunity to really showcase and explain my sensory sensitivities and how I like to present food. So yeah, it was challenging, especially when you get quite far into the competition. You almost run out of ways to present food in innovative ways. So I used a tiffin to separate my rice and curry, and that was presented in a very beautiful way. I did a thali, which is lots of different bowls on a plate. And I just did one where it was a plate with lots of different sides, and you can eat the food the way you want to eat it. But obviously there are challenges when you come to challenges and group surprise tasks and invention tests and things of such sort. And I really, really needed to work, I'd say 10 times as hard as everyone else, just to have a coping strategy to be able to even go into that room, you know?
Was there one particular task where you got there, saw what the task was, and just went, oh no?
Yeah.
Like your
For me,
first task.
for me, it was the cauliflower. As soon as I saw that cauliflower, day one, task one, I thought, I'm going home. I didn't say it out loud.
I think the kitchen stuff I was quite prepared for because it's what you see on TV. I was prepared for the environment. And on day one, you can kind of, because it was not all of us cooking at the same time. I was lucky enough to be, I think, maybe 5th or 6th cooking. So it gave me time to adjust. But further down the line, when we got to semi-finals, we were thrown into a fire college and were told to cook for 120 people in a kitchen that I wasn't allowed to see beforehand, and with ingredients and team members I'd only met once. You know, that was really tough. I really wanted to walk out halfway through, and despite extreme editing, you still see me having a crying nervous breakdown halfway through. They did cut it so that you don't see me crying into the cabbage, which FYI makes it more delicious. But
it's aggressive, right?
Yeah, in all honesty, it was one of the challenges. I was ready to quit the show after that. I felt like I was done, and I think that was the start of my steady decline. I was just ready to leave. It's that internal battle where you're so close now. There's only, at the time, I think 8. I could get into the finals here. There's not many of us, and there's not many challenges left. But at the same time, I'm so broken. I'm ready to go.
You had that self-awareness, I guess, that
Yeah.
I'm pushing it too hard now.
Yeah, and it didn't help that we lost that task, and then the next one was an invention test. So it was like I couldn't worry about the things coming after us, which was super important because you're looking for a place in the finals here. I was just thinking, how am I going to find a coping mechanism to deal with an invention test when you don't know what's coming? You know, so do I prepare for meat, fish, vegetarian, like a random challenge? You know, I don't know. And actually it's something that I couldn't have prepared for. It was a challenge of leftover tins and jars, so I never would have been able to predict that. And I have a photographic memory, so I have twice as much to kind of overcome, because if I look at that table, that's it, it's over, because I remember every single tin and jar and it sits in my brain for a very, very, very long time. And the fact that we are now 6 months since filming that, I can tell you every single tin and jar on the one table that I looked at. I chose not to look at the other table, actually.
Something that you alluded to just before, and it's something that I know that you're quite open about, is that masking issue. For anyone watching who doesn't understand masking, basically a lot of neurodivergent people, a lot of the time, especially females, it's a much stronger trait within female neurodivergence, but it spans all neurodivergent people. It's basically where I need to fit in. I got to sort of repress my authentic autistic self because I'm in a situation where it doesn't fit, or I don't feel comfortable to be myself. How was the masking process through something like, because you're on camera as well, you're not just masking in front of people, I'm guessing there's the extra dimension of knowing that you're being filmed. How did you deal with that? I mean, what was that process like?
How did I deal with it? I probably didn't. I was at the point of burnout, actually, after filming, that I just had to take the rest of the year off, and I took a very expensive long holiday and chose not to cook or see people for the rest of the year. I think in the moment I didn't anticipate, you know, you think I'm fine in front of a camera, it's not as intrusive of people as people think, you go about your business and it's a camera. But what I didn't anticipate is there is like 50 odd people in that room. You've got sound men, cameramen, light men, floor men, I don't know, every single person you can think of that has a random job will be in that room. There's lights you can't control, there's sounds you can't control. You're in a studio, so you're in very, very hot conditions, and I can't regulate my body temperature very well. I am always cold, and then before you know it, you're too hot, but I can't take off the clothes that I want to take off because they're my comfort blanket. And that's how I started the day, and that's how I will end the day. Where at home I might be comfortable enough if I'm very hot to take my jumper off, you cannot do that on TV. You have to have continuity. You cannot look like you've changed outfits. There's a couple of scenes that are filmed over 2 days, and you have to wear the same outfit, which is fine for me, but in my head I'm thinking, what happens if I spill stuff on it? Shall I buy 3 of the same jumper just in case? And you'll find that halfway through the episode I'll start off the show like this, and then it'll be like this because I'm too hot and heavy. And Twitter was going mental, basically. There were people watching the show saying, oh, there she goes, Vanessa, pretty Vanessa, their words, not mine, shows a bit of shoulder and gets through. Greg's looking for his new wife, so she only got through because, she's autistic and she showed some shoulder. Clearly, by the response of Twitter, I should have my own, like an OnlyFans for my left shoulder now. I'm pretty sure it will do very well.
What you signed up to? Is that a different Vanessa?
Vanessa and her left shoulder.
That would be such. There's some weird faction out there that's shoulders. It's all about shoulders.
Oh, for sure. So yeah, I mean, we're going into a cost of living crisis, so it might be my next thing because it obviously did very well on Twitter. But yeah, it goes to show that you can be yourself, or you can try and find a coping mechanism to your best ability in a situation, but you'll still never be able to nail it ever. And masking is incredibly tiring. Adam will tell you the Masterchef process is exhausting. It is difficult for neurotypical people at the best of times. You have the professional show where, this is somebody's job day in, day out. They're a head chef for a fancy Michelin star restaurant, and they crumbled literally under the pressure. I can't say I dealt with it very well, but I did the best that I could in the situation that I had.
Get as far as you did. That's obvious.
Yeah.
It took a lot of mind control. And it's so interesting because, I hate using the word normal, but I have only ever known my own brain. So this is very normal for my brain. Yeah. And it's only when you start to talk openly, I talk to my other contestants. We have a WhatsApp group from our Heat 1 competition. And actually, after the whole process was over, the chat had run dry because there was nothing to talk about and the show wasn't aired. I said, can I just ask, when you walked into that MasterChef kitchen, what exactly were you thinking? What were you feeling? And basically, their answers were all the same. It was a bit of nerves, super excitement. I was so, proud of myself for being there. And I thought, I wish that was all that was going through my mind. I had everything going through my mind. Why are there so many plug points on the floor? Can the sound man hear me? Oh my gosh, my stomach is rumbling. Why is it so bright in here? Oh my gosh, there's no extraction fan. So what happens if I'm cooking something and somebody else is cooking fish next to me? What will I do? Because I'm not now getting notice on a blender going off, a NutriBullet going off, all of these things. Plus, the MasterChef kitchen has like super reflective surfaces,
Yeah.
It is metal countertop, which is crazy because with the amount of light that go on in that room, it is just overwhelming, literally overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean,
it's induction hobs as well, and I don't know how to work induction. I don't know, and it doesn't give you temperatures, it just gives you numbers like 1 to 9. Like,
you need a degree. You need a degree to work those induction hobs, and I will say they have a mind of their own. One thing, I'm actually very lucky because I have an induction hob at home. It's not quite the same, and the one at home, I only use like one hob ring. I don't know whether that's an autistic trait or whether that's just a cooking trait, that you have like your favorite hob and you only use that one.
I have my favourite hob. Like you, I've also not cooked since MasterChef. and I came on Twitter for like a week because I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And then I made a sarcastic apology video that I put online that all but one online paper completely didn't get. It was Adam Pearson issues heartfelt apology after MasterChef debacle. and then Ladwivel, who I know, when Adam Pearson issues sarcastic apology for appalling MasterChef performance. And I'm like, yeah, those are my people.
We know.
Love it.
I mean, I'm guessing from what you said there, a big part of your neurodivergence is a sensory processing disorder. How does that translate in it? I mean, not just in that situation, but in general with cooking, going out, eating, how does that play out? Because it's one thing I've noticed is that, for my daughter, she'll like the flavor of many things, but she'll take a bite, it's like nut. And it's not the flavor, it's the texture that she's really responding to.
100%. And I guess this is why even into a sort of late teens, early adulthood, I only stuck to beige processed foods, and they were also very, very brand specific, because I am a super taster. So my sensory processing actually also comes with what they call super taste buds. I could taste the subtle nuances in a recipe change, etc., which makes me a great chef, but it makes me the worst food critic ever, because trust me, nothing gets past me. Gets past me.
That in itself brings up a really interesting thing, because, and it's something I know that Unilever have been in touch with you since your appearance, because they were wanting more input from the neurodivergent community on how to do these things. But it's one of those things. My daughter will know the difference between two different cans of tomato soup. To me, tomato soup's tomato soup. They all taste pretty much the same. It's much of a muchness. For her, even if it is, like you say, new recipe, she'll notice. And it's like, no, don't like that one. It's completely different.
The three most terrifying words I can see on packaging: new improved recipe. I'm like, no, why?
Yeah.
Why have you done this to me, Maryland cookies? Why?
Actually, it's interesting you say that the exact same words I used to present to Unilever, the words that no autistic or no neurodivergent person wants to see, is new and improved recipe. Companies like this probably only ever thought about the taste. Things have to change. It's inevitable. Laws and regulations change. They can't put in certain things. I get that. But I don't think companies like that ever thought about the change in packaging and how that can affect people. The feel, the sound, even when you open it. It's a tough one to navigate even now as a 37-year-old adult. Cooking helps me because I get a heads up on the textures and the sensory before it gets into my mouth. And often in situations, I think the question was actually, how do I cope when I go out and things? One, it's still a lot of masking. I still am sometimes embarrassed in situations to say, can I not have my sauce on my chicken, or can I have things deconstructed? I still also fear for how it's perceived. And perfect example, I went out a couple of weeks ago and I said, actually, because I would love to do some reviews, actually, because there is nowhere you can go online where you can look for just restaurant reviews on what the place is going to be like before you go there. There's lots of lovely Instagram bloggers that are doing, go here, it's fantastic, the drinks are great, the food's great, but these aren't things I'm particularly interested in. I can look at the menu online. Yeah. I want to know how loud it is. I want to know what the lighting is. I want to know what the seating setup is. There's lots of situations. Are there plug points nearby? Because I want to charge my phone, or if you've got kids that want iPads and they run out of battery very, very quickly, can you do that? The restaurant I was in, I said, what kind of adaptations will you make if I want things separate, or this or that? And actually, I kind of appreciate this as a chef. The chef actually said, unless you're a child, I'm not willing to do it. This is how I've created the meal, and it's how it's meant to go together. If you don't like it, there are other options. There is a pizza. and we could make a plain margarita pizza, and I'm happy making that. But everything else we've designed because it specifically goes. I respect that. I still haven't found the best coping mechanisms in situations and restaurants where I haven't really thoroughly researched it beforehand.
I'm a big fan of like a platter when I go out. There's very specific pub I'll go to, and I've got a very specific platter that has all the food I want, all separate. So the onion rings will be here, the wings will be here, the garlic bread will be in the middle, there'll be 2 pots of fries, there'll be like a potato coated hot dog, and I'll be like, yes.
All beige, love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All beige, meant for 4. I'll eat it on my own, and people will gather around and start watching.
Yeah.
And then I'll assume I'm doing it for YouTube. And clap.
Honestly, I mean, I actually don't know who creates those number of servings things, because sometimes I make a recipe and it's a cake and it's meant to serve 8. It does not serve 8. You know, according to Tesco, I'm like a family of 4. So whatever.
You should talk to Chris, who's one of the grumpy gits, because he's recently diagnosed ADHD, and if he hasn't had his meds, he'll eat an entire McDonald's menu. And has.
He can go. I've seen it happen.
But that could be part of the sensory processing as well, because I know that often affects is that feeling of fullness isn't something you feel.
100%. It's also, I think food is my grounding mechanism. So when I feel uncomfortable, that's why you'll always find if I need to socialize, I'd rather do it in a restaurant over a bar, because food is the one thing that I'm sure I'm able in any situation, wherever I am in the world, actually, to ground myself with something that I find safe. And I think you mentioned your daughter. It's not about the flavor. It's about the texture. And that is very much true to myself as well. My parents thought I was the worst Indian child they could possibly ever have because I wouldn't eat rice and curry as a kid. But actually, it was my grandmother that worked out it wasn't the flavor. And, you know, I think parents find it difficult when they're feeding kids, you know, especially young kids, you know, they say, try this, it's so delicious. And it's like, that's not helping me. I'm somebody that is very logical, I'm factual. Even as a small child, I would prefer you to say, this is wet and smooth, or this is lumpy. Be factual. But they weren't. They're just like, it's delicious. To you, mum. To you, it's delicious. My grandmother worked out very, very early on that actually it wasn't the flavor. It was the textures. So she actually, from a very young age, deconstructed a butter chicken curry. So she gave me the sauce separately, because the sauce is actually super nutritious. It's got nuts in it. It's got butter. It's got all good nutrients. You know, you've got your onions, your tomatoes. You've got lots of things in there. And it's blended the sauce. So it's extremely smooth. And it's actually known as, the word is makhni, and that means velvety smooth. So you sieve it a couple of times. So there are no bits in it. And I love the flavor of that. But if she gave it to me with chicken in, it's a no, because I want chicken in a chicken nugget or a chicken dipper. That is the flavor and the texture I'm okay with, because it's breaded. And I actually did that on the show. I deconstructed a butter chicken, and deconstruction is a word that no one wants to hear on MasterChef, let me tell you.
It's like a poisonous word, isn't it? It's
as soon as you say deconstructed, people are like, no. But actually,
deconstructed or sous vide.
Everyone's sous vide on the show. I chose not to, because I really hate the idea of putting something in a plastic bag and then giving it a bath for half an hour. I find that very weird.
I don't put my shopping in a plastic bag, or I put my cooking thing in a plastic bag.
Yeah, controversial, I know, but like for me, I think flavor happens when something connects with a pan and heat, you know, or fire.
I've got to ask, based on what you said, so you were diagnosed only a couple of years ago. Yeah. I get the feeling you knew a long time before that you were obviously neurodivergent or autistic or whatever. How did that process go for you? At what point did you go, I need to know this? Or did you not do that? And you know what I mean? I hear a lot of people saying, I don't want to be pigeonholed.
Sure.
For me, getting my daughter diagnosed or my wife diagnosed was more of an issue of, once I know what I'm dealing with, I can then adapt and support. I needed that as much as anything, as a parent, as a carer. What was it like for you?
It's interesting you say that I probably had an idea that I was neurodivergent. I actually didn't at all until lockdown hit and I lived alone. And my only social interaction, I actually didn't realize how much I love living alone and how much I hated actually going to an office and how much I masked. The 1 hour a day that you get to walk, I used to walk with my next door neighbor. And it's a relationship that, had only just emerged because of lockdown. How often do you really speak to your neighbors other than putting the bins out? So we used to do this 1 hour walk, and I think he assumed that I knew I was autistic because it was so apparently obvious. And I was a little bit offended at the time. I was like, me autistic? Because you just think about the stereotypes, and
Gay
also
man and music.
boy, non-verbal, all the stereotypes that now I'm like fighting so hard to try and change and create awareness from, right? And then it led to a whole rabbit hole of this being my special interest of research. I went to the GP and said, this is all the supporting evidence. I think I'm autistic. And I went to 2 different doctors within my GP, and both of them said, you are 35. I was 35 at the time. And you work. You don't need, you're clearly high functioning. You are okay in life. Just get on with your life. I wouldn't worry about this because we prioritize children. We prioritize, people that need more support than we think you need. And I was like, okay, right, let's try again. Went to another doctor in the GP surgery, same thing. So then I ended up having to go on a wait list for a private diagnosis. And I decided that I definitely wanted the diagnosis because I live my life in a very black and white way. And it was killing me, I guess, not knowing if I was autistic or not. I don't think
binary. It's often associated with autism, isn't it?
Exactly. And I don't think I particularly cared if I was or I wasn't. It was just about knowing. And once you know, you can understand yourself better. And I think that whole process led me to start thinking about myself. And it's so easy to live your life on autopilot. You don't have to be neurodivergent. You get up and you do the same routine. Ironically, I can't live without my routine, and that wasn't apparent to me till I started to do my assessment. And I guess the questions that they ask you in the 3 hours of your life that you do this assessment for got me to think about things that I'd never thought about before. And it's so interesting because I had never thought or questioned my parents' neurodiversity. And that assessment was so obvious that both my parents are neurodivergent. And it makes so much sense, especially when you're an only child and you've lived in that environment, how you're normal. Of course it's your normal. Both your parents are like that. Yeah. And they put themselves only in situations where they are comfortable. They don't put themselves outside of their comfort zone. So there was very little scope for me to understand the things that trigger me because I've never really had to experience it until I got to adult life.
Again, I come back to when you were talking to the doctors. It's one of the things that drives me nuts about the diagnostic process. You appear to be, I think, we shudder against severity labels within autism and stuff like that now because they're just so untrue. Because everything you've described to us so far, on the surface, you appear to be coping, but that's exactly what we talked about. That's masking. Yeah. So just because you're masking effectively, that doesn't take into account the undercurrent and the anxiety and the damage it's doing long term.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts that doctors don't understand this more.
Yeah, there's so much more education that needs to be done. And also just people need just to be more open about how they're truly feeling, because otherwise no one would ever know. It's what you're talking about, the iceberg. Nobody sees what's going on underneath, the toll that it's taken thereafter. So everyone sees I performed really well on Masterchef, but no one sees the collapse that happens when I get home and that my partner needs to deal with in order to survive the next day to go and do it again. People think surely you would have practiced that all weekend, and it's like, oh god, no, I need to practice conversations first. I need to practice lots of other coping mechanisms,
right,
for the recipe, because actually the recipe is the one thing that I'm least worried about. It's difficult. I don't think I ever would have performed at my best in a show like that, but I'm really, really ruddy happy I gave it a shot, and I did pretty well. Did very well.
How does it feel to be someone who's done well on MasterChef? I would like to know.
I don't know. If I'd had a cauliflower, I'm not sure what would have happened, to be fair.
Have you ever thought of cauliflower as a substitute for chicken? This is the burning question I've got.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the hugest fan of chicken, to be fair, because of the texture, but I would take chicken over cauliflower any day.
It's a good job you won Mastermind, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, and I've got another thing on the fifth that I'm doing, that I'm spotting up for.
Vanessa, I think that's the ideal place to draw this in. I can't thank you enough for joining us. If people want to find out more about you, where can they do so, and how can they get in touch or follow you?
So I am the Autistic Chef on Instagram, Facebook, all things social media, TikTok, so the.autistic.chef.
We will put
And
links in
with that, all it's left to do is say thank you very much to Masterchef Vanessa D'Souza, and to hand back to us in the future.
Isn't she amazing? And I just found that whole interview so enthralling to be part of, because the changes that she's making and the things that she's doing to advocate, and just her openness and honesty about being autistic and what it's like being autistic in a very neurotypical world really hit home for me. Thanks so much for joining us. Please do go hit like, subscribe, ring the bell so you know when new content's coming up. I will see you again on the next episode. In the meantime, please do stay safe.